you've watched the scene, be it Chicago Med or Grey's Anatomy or my personal favorite, New Amsterdam. A cloud of emergency medical professionals burst into the ER with a patient on a gurney, reading off a machine gun fire of medical observations about the patient's condition. Now, to the layperson, these people, these EMTs and paramedics, they're all the same thing, right? They all work the same job. They're the first responders. They respond to the 911 call, the first on the scene. They stabilize the patient, and then they transport the patient to the hospital if necessary. Well, in fact, an emergency medical technician, or EMT, is not the same as a paramedic. So if a career in emergency medicine calls to you, my conversation with Flight Paramedic Jesse Owens will be an important one for you to dial into, because we talk all about these two EMS roles in terms of education, responsibilities, salary, and job opportunities. So with that said, here's the full scoop on the difference between an EMT and a paramedic. Okay, Jesse, tell me, if you're at a cocktail party and somebody asks, what's the difference between an EMT and a paramedic? What is your kind of short answer?
I would have to say scope of practice. And what that essentially means is what the EMT or paramedic is able to do. Mm-hmm. Now, paramedics do have a larger scope of practice where they practice more advanced skills than compared to their counterparts of the EMTs.
Right. Okay, cool. So what additional education and experience does an EMT need in order to become a paramedic?
So EMT classes essentially have 100 to 200 hours requirement. Compared to a paramedic, they need 1,000 to 2,000 hours. So it's a 10-time difference in education.
Wow.
On top of that, typically EMTs have to be an EMT for a certain amount of years to become a paramedic.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. Well, you mentioned that greater scope of practice. So then what are some of those additional medical procedures or services, et cetera, that a paramedic can have or perform that an EMT can't?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually varies state by state and region by region, and it all comes down to what the medical director will allow that person to practice. Typically with paramedicine, you'll see more advanced procedures such as intubation, IVIO access, defibrillation, cardiac meds, and more invasive procedures, I would say, compared to EMT.
Can an EMT do, you're saying invasive, can an EMT do like injections?
No, actually they cannot, unless you're in a funky region where you have a certain specific set of protocols. In comparison for skills for an EMT, typically they do things like aspirin administration, oxygen, supplemental oxygen, and assist the paramedic in other skills.
Okay. All right. So where do paramedics work versus EMTs? It sounds like they can work together, but are there some specific jobs that you can only apply for if you are a paramedic, like on a helicopter or in war zones?
Yes, absolutely. So it's actually kind of funny. The EMT and paramedic are typically 90% of the time working together.
Oh, okay.
The EMT solely relies on the paramedic, and the paramedic solely relies on the EMT. It's a very cooperative basis of working.
Yeah.
On the military side, though, there are specific functions that a paramedic will have to be, such as a flight paramedic, critical care flight paramedic, as well as the civilian side, where helicopter EMS or HEMS will require a paramedic to have 3 to 5 years experience before they're able to fly with their RN or flight nurse partner.
Oh, cool. Are there any other cool positions, weird and wonderful, that, us regular folk aren't aware of?
There actually is. So, some paramedics can actually work on an oil rig, and they'll do a week to a month rotation out on the intercoastal seas on an oil rig. They make fantastic money.
Wow.
Another position is civilian contracting overseas in Afghanistan, Iraq, places of war zones where the government will contract EMTs and paramedics alike to go over there and work in their scope of practice.
It's exciting. Sure. So what are some of the hallmark character traits of a paramedic that may possibly set them apart from an EMT? In other words, what motivates somebody to pursue that higher training to get to paramedic level?
Yeah, character traits, I would say that EMT and paramedic, they're both goal-oriented. I wouldn't want to say type A personalities, but they are. They're very goal-oriented and want to accomplish the next mission at hand. And what was the second question?
Just sort of what would motivate somebody to pursue that higher education to become a paramedic, as opposed to just, having a career as an EMT?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times, and I would say most of the time, what it comes down to is the EMT is currently working with a county service or a private service, And the only way for them to advance in either pay scale or in practice is to become a paramedic.
Okay.
On top of that, the companies usually possess or offer certain type of incentives, such as they will pay for your paramedic school if you work for that company for an X amount of time.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's some very good incentives for them.
Yeah, makes sense. On average, how much more do paramedics earn than EMTs? I know it probably varies state by state, but is there some ballpark figure?
Oh yeah, it varies greatly. And what comes to mind too, you have to think about is cost of living. So down in the deep South in Georgia, South Carolina, you will see lower wages, but the cost of living is significantly lower as well.
Yeah.
In California, you'll see very high wages where there is a very high cost of living. Typically though, for a ballpark figure on average, I would say $2 to $5 difference starting off for an hourly wage. And that accounts for overtime as well. So you do get time and a half typically on every paycheck.
Okay. And then what are some of the best paid EMT and paramedic jobs in the US, and sort of which states pay the highest salaries, taking into account that, cost of living?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually going to break this down state by state, starting with Hawaii is actually the highest paid, but again, you have to account for the cost of living. Second would be Washington. Third is Maryland. Okay. Now, in terms of actual positions where you are compensated more, better benefits, the top spot for an EMT or paramedic to be is a government or civilian contractor. You receive government pay, government benefits, government retirement, which always is phenomenal compared to civilian side. Second, I would have to say would be fire paramedic or fire EMT. Those are usually compensated very well.
Yeah.
Third would be helicopter EMS as a paramedic, working as a flight paramedic.
Yeah.
And then fourth, you'll see your lower wages for your county services and interfacility private services.
Okay, cool. Well, you're a flight paramedic, so let's switch gears just a little bit. Being a flight paramedic means you've run the gauntlets of EMT and paramedic training. So for those who are only just embarking upon their education, what are your best study tips for efficiently learning all the content you need to be effective in the field?
So this will vary person by person, but I think the number one is repetition. Whether it's learning vocabulary, learning different skills, it's repetition.
Right, yeah.
And for me, that worked really well was I actually started with paper flashcards, and I would make 2,000, 3,000 flashcards. And you can do these while you're on an airplane. You can do them while you're using the bathroom, anywhere that's convenient for you. And then I actually transitioned over to the digital flashcard era. And that's where Brainscape come into play for me.
Okay, cool. Well, tell me what role flashcards like Brainscapes have played in helping you in your career. Do you I know you use them to study and to, get your certification, but do you still refer to your flashcards today to refresh or learn?
All the time. And during my actual paramedic program, I'd have two laptops. I have one laptop to my right, and I would write down all the definitions on one end, and then I write down the question on the other, and I'd upload those straight to Brainscape after our paramedic class.
Wow.
Yeah, it helped a lot. Honestly, I don't think I would have passed without the flashcards. I was able to share these with my students and my coworkers as well that were in the same class as me. And we would study on our time off. We would study on our shift work. Anytime we could, we'd quiz each other because we had those conveniently in our pocket, and it worked out perfect.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it. The difference between an EMT and a paramedic, straight from the expert's mouth, Flight Paramedic Jesse Owens. Now, on a personal note, if you are indeed watching this because it's your goal to work in EMS, the team here at Brainscape would like to thank you for your brave decision to become a first responder, and we wish you all the very best with your studies. If you're in EMT school and preparing to take the NREMT certification exam, you've got to get Brainscape certified EMT flashcards in your corner. This collection contains 10 decks and a total of more than 500 adaptive flashcards that are designed to drill you on the key concepts that will likely show up on exam day. With the curriculum condensed down to a super efficient flashcard format, you can use Brainscape anytime, anywhere, and on any device to study more efficiently with spaced repetition. Brainscape also has an EMT Academy packed with helpful guides on topics that range from what you can expect from EMT school and how to study more efficiently to the difference between an EMT and a paramedic and how to get the best jobs. So grab the tools Brainscape has for you, study hard, and rise to the challenge of emergency medicine.